are talking American Cannibals from 2021, and this is a low-budget vampire movie. It has a duo of directors and an unknown cast. It's a very low-budget movie, and it focuses on a documentary film crew doing a documentary on cannibalism in America. And as part of this, they are interviewing this kind of so-called real-life vampires who, you know, drink human blood and etc. All consensual and everything like that. And they kind of do this investigation and find out these vampires may be a little bit more sinister than they first appear. Now, what will happen? You will have to watch the movie and find out. So this movie boasts a, I suppose, a somewhat of a unique selling point in the fact that it stars, air quotes, real vampires. There is a kind of a, I don't know what you exactly call it, a vampire troupe called the Rocky Mountain Vampire Family, who are a group of people who kind of live as vampires. And they feature within this movie as clearly vampires. So it has that sort of unique selling point, and obviously they are kind of playing a kind of versions of themselves, I guess. So these guys are playing, you know, real life, you know, air quotes, real life vampires who, you know, go to these kind of goth nightclubs and do kind of mock rituals and things like this. So it has that interesting kind of element to it. And now I've reviewed one or two movies, I think, that have, you know, featured, air quotes, real vampires before. But I think it is an interesting, if not a little niche subject matter for a movie of clearly about a kind of a vampire movie. So I think it does have some interesting ideas here. These kind of small little subcultures that are dotted around the world, and you know, and how they may act and things like this. Now, what else could I say that I think maybe works in this movie? It's a very, very low budget film, but I will say there are a couple of sequences that are actually genuinely quite creepy. There's a sequence, it's probably in the third act, where they're kind of going into this kind of building. I think it's meant to be like a nightclub or something, and there's just these kind of, they see these like vampires through the kind of the lens of the camera, and then there's another like a room where they're all just kind of standing like dead still and everything like that. And I'm going to say, you know, there's a couple of creepy sequences within this movie that I think, wow, you know, it's just turned out really nice with the kind of like the lighting and the way they've kind of got these kind of shots of these kind of vampires looking kind of menacing. They're not kind of doing anything really, they're just kind of standing around. But I think that's, in this film at least, is when these, you know, air quotes, vampires are actually the most menacing. So what doesn't work? So this is a very low budget film, and as such it has a number of amateur things that are present within the film. Some of the technical elements aren't particularly sharp. There's quite poor audio in a lot of this movie. A lot of the times people will be saying dialogue and it's hard to understand what they're saying, because it's like a muffled sound, or it's kind of like just not, it's kind of mumbled, or there's kind of like ambient noise or music cues or something like that, kind of just drowning it out. So the audio isn't particularly good. There's a couple of kind of awkward edits where you'll hear like, you know, audio artifacts and things from one edit to another. So it's clearly a kind of a lower budget film with people who have little experience or using kind of like basic equipment and things like that. So it has that sort of amateurish feel. The biggest issue, I think, with this film is, well, it's a two-parter. It's the acting and the characterization. So the acting first. Now, despite we actually have like an intro with the two directors at the beginning of the film sort of saying about how most of the cast are these kind of air quote real life vampires, but I'm assuming that is the people who are playing vampires. The people who play our documentary film crew actually get far and away more screen time, and they are not, you know, these kind of real life vampires. At least I don't think so. But what they aren't is good actors. The acting here is real, like, very, very amateurish. I'm going to have some speculation here. I think there wasn't much of a script, because it feels like people are coming up with the lines on the fly and they don't really know what they're saying. I suspect, and this is only my speculation, that there was probably more of an overlay, like a story overlay, than a script exactly, because the dialogue here feels like people aren't really sure what to say in these kind of situations, in the way that it's kind of, the actual wording, the kind of the way it's said and delivered by the kind of the actors, it just feels kind of like poorly done. So I suspect there wasn't, you know, people weren't reading dialogue from a script exactly. They were kind of just going with the gist and kind of saying what they wanted to say. And this instance, didn't think it worked. So the acting isn't particularly good. There's also some quite poor hand. It's kind of like, I've mentioned this in a few reviews, where sometimes people don't know what to do with their hands. I see it in inexperienced actors where they're kind of saying lines and their sort of arms just kind of swing around and don't know what to do with them and things. So there's this kind of, the sort of the body language of these kind of acting, not brilliant. So the acting wasn't great, and there's virtually no character building in this movie. I mean, we have these kind of 4 documentary filmmakers, and one's female, one's kind of a younger man. There's 2 kind of like other guys. And that's basically as good a characterization as you're going to get. Oh, the younger guy and the woman maybe in a relationship. That's it. I mean, I didn't feel like I got to know these characters as well. So we have characters that you don't really feel like you get to know, coupled with kind of poor acting. And they spend a lot of time on screen. And don't get me wrong, the bulk of this film isn't the vampires. It's these kind of documentary film crew going around sort of interviewing random people on the street or making tea. And doing things like this, and it's just like, it feels like you are literally watching someone's work video at times. Not all that interesting. But what about the actual kind of vampire, these real air quote vampires themselves? I mean, it's a horror film, so you don't need to be a genius to figure out where this plot is going to go. I would have liked to have done something a little more interesting with it, if I'm honest. I mean, these kind of this subculture of real life vampires, I mean, like I said, there's a couple of shots where I do think they look effective in regards to some spooky shots, but they've like caked on the makeup and things like this, and it's like, these are the, I mean, I don't want to be sort of disparaging necessarily, but it would have been interesting to maybe have a look at the sort of like, are these people, you know, were the documentary filmmakers looking at the kind of the mental stability of the people within this group or something like that? Had that been addressed, you know, what would make someone want to do this for, you know, a lifestyle choice? It would have been an interesting idea, you know, to explore why it is someone feels the need to kind of like identify with this kind of like fantasy subculture, if you like, and you know, have a psychological aspect to it, but it's not addressed. It's just like, you know, it's just not a sophisticated movie like that. So I think there was the opportunity to have some depth there and to maybe dive into a psychological kind of like horror, maybe more than out and out kind of like, yes, these are actually real vampire types. Would have been interesting, and to explore that kind of psychological side to it. So, you know, it has like an interesting premise, and there are a couple of creepy moments, but the acting, primarily I have to say, from the documentary filmmakers isn't good, and these kind of these air quote real life vampires, I mean, they just seem like somewhat sort of like left behind from society is the best way I would kind of describe this, and kind of like, I don't know, I don't want to be too kind of like disparaging because these are apparently real people. But anyway, there you go. I'll give it a 3 out of 10. I don't think it's a particularly kind of a well put together film, if I'm honest. Outside of a couple of creepy moments, and I think it's seed of a good idea, but they're just, the execution of it I don't think is all that well done, if I'm honest. Maybe it's early days for these filmmakers. Maybe if they kind of carry on with their kind of craft, they'll kind of perfect it a little bit. But for now, this one's a 3 out of 10. Would you see it? Do leave me a comment. I look forward to seeing you next time.